For almost a century, the 1st Battalion, the Welsh Guards, has played a prominent role in the military and ceremonial life of the nation. Ian Dale from Pontypridd was just 17 years old when he joined the Welsh Guards.
Ian was somewhere 6'5". He was quite a big boy. I can remember watching him trooping the colour in 1981. He was actually on the escort that trooped the colour through the ranks. I felt as if my heart was going to burst out of my chest. I was so proud of him. Standing next to this man, poke him and then said, "That man over there, that's my son." Yeah, I was really proud of him, really proud.
10 months later, in April 1982, Ian was told that his unit would be joining the task force to the Falkland Islands. Recently married, his wife was expecting their first child.
His attitude to us was, "Don't worry about it. All we're going to do is police the island. It's going to be another adventure." That's what he said. The army gives you adventures in your life. And he said, "This is just going to be another one for me, Mum. And I'm looking forward to it." He said, "I'm married, Debbie, and I'm going to be a dad, and I'm going to have a big adventure."
Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands on the 2nd of April 1982, overpowering its tiny defence force at the capital Port Stanley, and imposing its will on a community with strong historic links to Britain. From the moment that Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher announced that she was sending a task force in response to the invasion, there was fierce competition within the armed forces to be involved in it. At their headquarters in Pirbright, Surrey, the Welsh Guards were delighted when their battalion was chosen to take part in Operation Corporate, the code name given to the task force's mission.
We had a press day before we went to the Falklands, and I was in a big bush, I remember, and the camera crew came up and said, "Here's one here," and I think when the camera was on, he just made it look a bit more Rambo type, I think, coming up the bush.
I do remember us all, me getting the men in three sides of a square on the barrack square in Pirbright. The boss gave his address to the nation, that I called it, and said, "Look, we're going and we'll take care of each other."
We sail south, quietly confident.
Every soldier wishes to take part in his métier. He's trained to fight, he's trained to go on operation, and that's what he wants to do. And the whole battalion was buzzing with excitement and enthusiasm.
I know that we will live up to the highest standard of our regimental traditions, whatever lies ahead.
The task force left British shores amidst scenes of patriotic fervour.
It was an exciting time. It was, because the whole country was buzzing for to go down here and recapture the Falklands, and so everybody is quite proud that we were going. It was quite a. That's what you trained for. That's not necessarily what you joined for, but the opportunity came along, and I think that nobody in their right mind was going to turn it down.
The Welsh Guards travelled on the QE2, which had been requisitioned as a troop carrier.
No better way to go to war than a QE2, I suppose. It can't get better than that, but yeah, all the carpets were boarded over and certain things were protected and all that, but it was still a very nice ship.
It's nice, you go down into the cabin, somebody that pays thousands of pounds to go on there, and there we are. And eating their food as well. Not army food, proper food.
Ian Dale's family were among the crowds on the quayside at Southampton to wave him off.
It was a happy day because the bands were playing and everybody was waving and cheering, but my husband and my son were not happy because they knew that things can happen in war. But for Debbie and I, it was not going to be a problem. He was going to go out, as he told us, to police the island, and that's what he said, and that's what we believed, thankfully, because at that time I didn't know that within a very short time I would lose him.
The Falkland Islands are 8,000 miles from the UK, off the southernmost tip of South America. For the task force, it involved a 4-week journey into the unknown.
I think initially we all looked at it as a bit of an adventure, and we all thought that probably it would not result in the war that it did result in. And we thought we'd sort of set sail, get halfway down it to Ascension Island, the whole thing would be resolved, and the governments would, between themselves, resolve it, and we'd turn back and come back.
Pick a point, out to sea!
The troops travelling south spent their time in intensive training. The prospect of war still seemed a long way off.
Cock the weapon, it's not cocked, pull it right out. Recock it, come on, get it out, pull it hard. It wasn't cocked, was it, Slider?
I don't think anybody has got a sense of what it's going to really be like. It's impossible. You can't recreate it even on a training exercise. In reality, you don't know what the enemy's going to do. They do what they want to do, and you have to react.
Don't hand the weapon unless you're actually going to fire it. Okay, turn to your front, fire!
I think it really hit to me that, hang on a minute, I'm actually going to go to war, was when they give you cards to say, what do you do if you're taken prisoner? You don't get many of them on guard duty at Buckingham Palace. So when we had these cards, then I thought, well, hang on a minute, it's getting a bit serious now.
A vital component of the flotilla sent to the South Atlantic were the vessels of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. Among them was Sir Galahad, whose job was to resupply the fighting ships with food and fuel, and to transport troops and equipment. Because the Galahad had been rushed into service with the task force, when it reached the British base at Ascension Island 2 weeks later, its cargo had to be reorganised.
A lot of the stuff that we had was wanted by other ships, and the same with the troops. So it was all moved around in a horrendous operation which lasted 4 or 5 days. We eventually sailed from Ascension Island, I think it was on the 21st of April, bound south for the Falklands.
Days later, the danger and unpredictability of the British mission was hammered home when HMS Sheffield was crippled by an Argentine missile, with the loss of 20 lives. On the 21st of May, while the Welsh Guards were still travelling south on the QE2, Sir Galahad was among the first wave of ships to take part in the British invasion of the Falklands, one of the biggest amphibious operations since the Second World War. The beachhead landing area was at San Carlos Water, and within hours of the ships arriving at the inlet, thousands of troops and tons of equipment and ammunition came ashore unopposed.
It was a beautiful morning, and the sun was coming up on all of these hills, and it's a rather nice enclosed bay of San Carlos, and reminiscent of Scotland and the islands of Scotland.
But the tranquility that greeted the task force was not to last. The ships soon came under heavy and sustained air attack, earning San Carlos the nickname Bomb Alley. It was during one of these attacks a few days later that the Galahad was hit by a 1,000-pound bomb, but luck was on her side, this time.
I was actually standing on the bridge wing. I saw it leave the aircraft, and it bounced on the water and went through the ship's side, and fortunately failed to explode. And that did actually quite a lot of damage down on the port side of the ship. It knocked out all the troops' accommodation.
The Galahad was quickly patched up and put back to work resupplying ships and troops around the islands. The Welsh Guards finally arrived in San Carlos 2 weeks after the Galahad, on the 2nd of June, 1982. They were part of 5 Brigade, whose job ultimately was to attack Argentine positions in the south of the Falklands. For Guardsman Ian Dale, as for so many others arriving in a strange place on the other side of the world, thoughts turned to the folks back home.
I had a letter saying that they'd enjoyed the trip. They were looking forward to getting in and seeing what they could do to the Argies, as they call them. But they were up to their eyeballs in water. They were absolutely frozen. Their feet were soaking because they were just dug in. But he seemed quite happy. He wasn't afraid. That's the main thing. He wasn't afraid.
After 24 hours at San Carlos, and with the pressure on to retake the islands before the full onset of winter, the Welsh Guards set off to march over the Sussex Mountains to take up their forward positions in the south.
We received orders to march off and give us, to wait, just that we were moving. So everybody packed up and off we went. We'd only gone, 5 mile, something like that maybe. And then we were told to come back because we wouldn't be there in time wherever they was supposed to be.
It was just impossible to do it because of the weather conditions, because of the amount of kit and equipment we had, because the brigade commander had ordered the commanding officer to take all our equipment with us and get across there, ready to get involved in the southern fight for Stanley.
The battalion has been criticised for pathetically not being able to march across the Sussex Mountains. And I can assure you, most emphatically, my battalion was as fit as any battalion that fought in the Falklands War. And that I can assure you.
The overland option having failed, it was decided that the Welsh Guards would now be taken round to the south of the island aboard HMS Fearless. The plan was that they would rendezvous with 4 landing craft at a place called Lively Island, and that these would take them and their equipment into Bluff Cove. But on the night of the 6th of June, when the Fearless arrived at the agreed location, there was no sign of the landing craft. The rendezvous never took place. Commodore Michael Clapp, the senior officer in charge of amphibious operations, didn't discover the full story until years later. They'd been commandeered by a unit from the Parachute Regiment and put to use elsewhere.
The Paras wished to use the landing craft in order to reinforce their own people, so they hijacked them in order to support Tupara. I'm told that a degree of initiative like that is inevitable in war. To me, it looked like anarchy. In a way, it was, I'm afraid.
The Fearless was carrying 2 landing craft of its own, enough to transport only half the Welsh Guards to Bluff Cove. So it was decided to split the battalion. Half went ashore with Colonel Rickett. The other half returned to San Carlos, intending to complete the operation the following night.
Of course we weren't happy about it. I mean, we were a battalion, we were a fighting unit. We trained together, and I mean, the ideal solution was to land us together, and then as a unit, we'd get on with whatever task we were given.
We walked halfway to Stanley a couple of nights before, and we had to turn back. Now we've got to this point, and now we've got to turn back again. Frustration and disappointment set in at that point.
In fact, the success of the entire British mission was hanging in the balance. Argentine hits on important warships like HMS Antelope made Task Force Command review its strategy. It was decided that HMS Fearless shouldn't be sent on any more dangerous missions, taking troops to forward positions. And so the plans to move the Welsh Guards changed again. They were now transferred to the more vulnerable Sir Galahad, a ship the military planners were willing to risk.
It's not like you get disappointed or anything. It's just, oh, well, we're doing this now. Or, no, we're not doing that now. Military life is, I suppose, enduring conflicts, is more of an organised chaos than anything else.
Late on the night of the 7th of June, while the Welsh Guards were asleep, the plan to reunite them with the rest of their battalion changed yet again. Sir Galahad was ordered to deliver the troops not to Bluff Cove, but to the nearby inlet at Fitzroy. It was assumed that they would march to join up with the other half of their battalion at Bluff Cove, using a bridge that had recently been repaired. But that night, nobody told the Welsh Guards aboard the Galahad of this change of plan.
It thundered round the bottom at best speed, and we'd arrived off the entrance to Fitzroy. It was just starting to get light. We could see the hills over Stanley, and it was getting them in the weather was actually lifting at the time, and so the visibility was pretty good.
Sir Galahad was now out of direct radio contact with Task Force Command back in San Carlos. As dawn broke, it was obvious that with the weather rapidly improving and very little air defense, the ship was dangerously exposed.
Well, I thought to myself, we shouldn't be on here. We should have been off at night. Didn't expect to be on any light at all. That was frightening, because you're there sitting targets and you can't do anything.
A Marines officer, Major Ewan Southby Taylor, was in charge of landing craft operations at Fitzroy. He was shocked to see the arrival of a ship packed with troops, and just after dawn, he went over to the Galahad. He said that the ship was in grave danger from Argentine air attack, and he offered the men immediate transport to the shore, a few hundred yards away.
And I put it to the senior officer that I could find on the stern of the Galahad that my considered and professional opinion as a landing craft officer and somebody involved in amphibious warfare for almost all my career was that they should get off first and then wait. He was adamant that Bluff Cove was his destination and not Fitzroy. I was equally adamant that I was not going to take him to Bluff Cove in anything in daylight.
The fog of war had descended. It's always been assumed that the person he argued with and who refused the opportunity to get his men off the ship was Major Guy Sale, the senior Welsh Guards officer on board. Major Sale is speaking publicly about the matter for the first time in 25 years.
I did not speak to him. I know that Ewan Southby Taylor said what he said. Everyone has a different memory of what was said, but I know what was said to me, and I know what I said to other people, and that's what I said to you.
Guy Sale does accept that at first he refused to get his men off the ship. But within half an hour, he had a meeting with the captain and a compromise was agreed.
The captain said to me, "I understand you're not getting off." I said, "No, not exactly. I will if you can get some orders from someone." Within half an hour, those new orders came, and they were to go in the landing craft round to Bluff Cove in 2 groups.
The problem was that there was only one landing craft and one pontoon raft at Fitzroy, and both were busy unloading another ship, Sir Tristram. By this time, the Welsh Guards had already been waiting in Fitzroy on an unprotected ship for well over an hour, and concern was mounting.
We're going through all the whys and wherefores of why we were there, and what would seem a major cock-up by the planners that we were sent to a place where there were no assets to get rid of all these troops and vehicles and things that we were loaded with at the time. But it was obviously of great concern to me that we were sat there as a sitting target with all these personnel on the ship.
The headquarters of 5th Brigade, of which the Welsh Guards were a part, was just a few hundred yards away on shore. But they weren't expecting the Galahad, and they had no plan for getting the Guards off the ship.
It was a whole chapter of little accidents which, when you're 70 miles away, 80 miles away, without knowing what was going on, without able to do things, you're lost. You cannot make the right decision. You cannot say, "Stop, I won't send the Welsh Guards in with Sir Galahad." The thing starts to roll.
2.5 hours after the Galahad's arrival, the landing craft and raft were free to begin unloading. But now it was decided that a field ambulance unit should take priority over the Welsh Guards, and that was unloaded first.
Everybody knew they needed to get off this ship. We all knew we needed to get off, but we all knew we couldn't. There was no way off. You couldn't swim. You couldn't swim off with all your kit. You needed transport. You needed a landing craft. So until that turned up, there was nothing else to do about it.
Many of the guardsmen were waiting on the tank deck of the Galahad, surrounded by vehicles and ammunition.
We were below decks, and we were there all day. We knew it was daylight, obviously, but we were in an enclosed space. And throughout the day, there was a case of, right, put your kit on, we're getting off, and then stand down, take your kit off, relax, we're not. And this must have happened 5 or 6 times during the day. The general feel on board the ship, the lads were playing cards, they were catching up on their sleep, you know, cleaning weapons, just the general day-to-day stuff. But you were doing this, of course, sitting on boxes of ammunition and fuel.
Finally, after 6 hours, the Welsh Guards were about to disembark. But the Galahad's luck had run out. The Argentine Air Force struck out of a clear blue sky.
There was suddenly this roar, and I looked up and saw the bottom of 5 aeroplanes, or even 6. But the first 2 had bombs coming off it that tumbled. There's a photographic image that I still got, disappearing into the hatch and a sheet of flame coming out.
The world turned orange. You get lifted as if you're a rag doll. I probably had 40, 50 pound of kit on me. And you might as well have been a feather.
I was standing here, it turned that way to look to your left where the explosion come. And 5 would have hit me on the left-hand side.
The air in your body gets sucked out. It's not a case of you hold your breath, you haven't got any breath to hold. You're flying in all things. Every bone is rattling, every nerve is getting hurt.
That's all you could hear when it hit you was sort of a rushing noise. And to my left were all the mortar platoon. They took the full force of it.
I found myself in a heap of bodies, men, live men. I was on top of some people on top of me. And the heap that we were in, the higher up in the heap you were, the more burnt you were. I was very fortunate that the blokes that were in front of me took some of the blast.
I realised that we'd been hit pretty badly, and I decided that my best course of action was to get everybody out from down below onto the upper decks. And so I made a pipe on the ship's broadcast to abandon ship.
For the first 10 seconds, was panic. After that, reality sets in what's happened. And then the professionalism sets in. And then everybody getting on top as fast as you can get it.
That's when they all started coming out of the doorway. Everybody was burnt, smoking, fire clothes all burnt. Well, you could see they're in a pretty bad way, and they're just piling out of this door. And it was like no room, it was horrendous, really.
About 30 seconds after we got out onto the tank deck for the 3rd time, after getting everybody up, a big explosion happened. That was the ammunition going up. That was the vehicles down there going up. And then we knew when there's no going to go back down because everybody gone.
It's a horrible feeling. The very first feeling you get is, thank God it's somebody else and not you. And as soon as you think it, you regret it, because then somebody else is where your mates.
Just around the inlet at Bluff Cove, the commanding officer Johnny Rickett and his regimental sergeant major Tony Davis had no idea where the other half of their men were.
I remember very well. And the emotion comes back now. That I grabbed Tony, we got on the motorbike, and we could see this plume of smoke coming off a ship. One of 2 ships were actually in Fitzroy Harbour.
We didn't actually know that all our guys were on that ship when it was bombed. We didn't even know our guys were on the ship.
In my heart of hearts, when I saw that ship had been hit, I don't know if it was premonition, but I knew there were Welsh Guardsmen on board that ship.
Both ships were burning, the Tristram and the Galahad. The lifeboats were taking some of the men ashore. You could say it was chaotic, but it was organised chaos in a way, because once the boys had got off the ship and once they were getting into the shore, there were lots of help. The field ambulance was ashore. They were administering first aid and, morphine and helping the guys that needed help. Lots of good things were happening, but it was pretty horrendous.
Because the injured were quickly transported to many different ships and field hospitals to be treated, it took days to establish the extent of deaths and injuries.
Friday we were told that he was missing, and it was Saturday evening, about 4 o'clock, 4:30, 5 o'clock, when the army came to the door. And that's when they said, although there is no body to prove that your son is dead, we have to assume that he is, because we cannot find him. I just said, we've lost him. I know he was missing, but I knew that we wouldn't see him again. And I looked at my husband. He couldn't speak to me, and I couldn't speak to him. And I remember he banged his head against the wall, as if he wanted to take some of the pain. But you can't take that type of pain away. It's not easy.
Six days after the bombing of Sir Galahad, on the 14th of June 1982, the Argentine forces surrendered.
Lance Corporal Anthony Burke, Lance Sergeant James Carlyle, Guardsman Ian Dale.
With the rest of the task force celebrating victory in the Falklands, the Welsh Guards returned to Fitzroy for a memorial service.
Guardsman Mark Gibby.
It was held on board the Tristram, with the Galahad still smouldering in the background.
Paul Green, Lance Corporal Nicholas David Mark Thomas.
It was a very, very moving day. I had to read the names out of the guys that were killed.
Guardsman Dennis Hughes.
One name in particular, it was a boy that I joined up with, and I'd been speaking to him just before I left the tank deck, and they read his name out, and a moment of real sadness that.
Guardsman Irwin Phillips, Guardsman Gareth Poole.
I knew every single one of them. We were one very close family. Commanding and being in a battalion which is in war, and it was a horrible war, although it was short, is a very, very, very special thing.
At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
After the service, the Galahad was towed out to sea and sunk as a war grave. It seemed like the end of a tragic episode in an otherwise successful campaign.